Hello and welcome back to Processing the Process, where we capture and discuss the technical, psychological, and contextual dynamics that shape the process of creating a work of art. Week by week, moment by moment, we're following Allie K. Dakers, teacher, actor, director, and producer, as she shapes the development of her innovative middle school drama club program and guides her students' idiosyncratic journeys. Today, we'll be focusing on the October 24th middle school drama club meeting. And the theme of this meeting is emotion commotion.
Yes.
So let's see how this played out, because I'm sure we can imagine all kinds of scenarios. Well, it started with the shakedown warm-up. But the difference this week is that Allie asked for a volunteer brave soul to lead it. Now, she explained to the kids that you don't have to be perfect, because this is a place where you can make mistakes and try again. So here, Allie, you established the concept of the student assuming the role of leader and the kids following her lead, and also reinforced the program's overall student-centric focus.
Yeah. The difference is now I walk around the circle, everybody's circled up, and I walk around and I say, I need a brave soul. I need a brave soul. And the idea behind this is to establish the fact that they will be leading warm-ups from here on out, and every single kid will have that opportunity to do that. Some of them are terrified when I propose this. Other kids are reaching their hand, me, choose me.
Right.
But I want to point out to them, though, too, the way in which one leads and the way in which one follows. We're benevolent leaders in this case. We need to speak respectfully with intention and be, basically having that overall respectful tone. That's how people listen to you. That's how you're going to get action out of others. If you recognize that they matter, their opinion matters, we just have to follow this agenda at this moment. And right now, this is what we're listening to. You're listening to my voice. So you need to speak with authority, but also with respect. So.
Well, interestingly, you took the same approach again for the next warm-up called Clap Connect, which we talked about last week. But again, the difference this time was that Allie asked for another brave soul to lead it. So, Allie, I'm assuming that this descriptor, brave soul, is not accidental.
No, it's not. It's not. I definitely recognize that some of these kids are really nervous coming out. I want to show them that where we are working and the environment in which we're working is one of compassion, one of taking chances. I recognize that they're stepping out of their comfort zone, and I point that out.
Yes.
And I say to them too, that where we grow is not in that comfort zone. We grow when we're pushed beyond that place.
Right.
Yeah. So I actually asked this one kid who was terrified. His eyes were wide-eyed. He was really kind of almost shaking in his boots a little bit.
Oh my.
And I went up to him and I said, you. And I walked him slowly and I was like, you. And he's like, what, me? And I was like, you got this. You can do this. He was at the previous meeting. He knows what it was. He was a part of it. And I kind of coaxed it out of him. And he did do it. He messed up a little bit, and that's okay. We definitely fall on our face here. That's fine.
Right.
But he did it. He successfully pulled it off. And he was a sixth grader. He was a youngster. And it sort of pushed him into owning that a little bit. So, and he did a great job. At the end of the day, he was able to pull it off. So it was good.
What's interesting, it's listening to you, it's making me think about the balance you, I imagine, intentionally always try to strike between pushing the kids in a little bit out of their comfort zone and scaffolding them sufficiently.
Definitely. I wouldn't have chosen a kid that wasn't there the previous week that had experienced it. And you can kind of read the kids. If a kid was genuinely like about to cry, I absolutely would have said, well, why don't you pick the next person and you'll go next week? Something like that, too, to kind of ease them into it.
Right.
But, yeah, you do have to be aware of kind of the psychology of the kid, him or herself, and make sure you have what's in place for them so they can find that success, or feel safe, at least if they're going to fail, to be able to kind of wrap it up and pull it together the next time they do it. So.
Exactly. Oh, good. I have a question for you about that in just a little while. But next came a game called Sound Ball. And the kids are in a circle, I think. Right.
Yeah.
And one student tries to send a sound all the way across the circle to another student. And then so on and so forth as you go randomly around the circle. Now, interestingly, Allie, you felt that the kids really did well and that this game stretches them.
Yeah.
How so? Because on the surface, it's not necessarily that apparent.
Yeah. It literally gives them their voice. They're pushed to kind of literally launch that voice across the room. So you might have a kid who's there, who's shy, who's kind of still a little, buttoned up a little bit. That sound comes to him. They repeat the sound that they received and send something new to somebody else. So it literally is giving them their voice. It breaks down the inhibitions. And it's a fast-moving game, so not too much attention is placed on any one kid for a long period of time either. So if a kid is nervous, wondering when their turn is, they also know their turn is going to be over very quickly. So they can kind of toe dip in that and feel accomplished after having achieved their turn. So
exactly. Yeah. Well, it is at this point that Allie then poses the drum roll please question, which is, are you ready for your first masterclass? But Allie's not exactly greeted with applause and cheers, but rather with groans.
I was a little surprised by that. I think they misunderstood. They thought it would be very like a classroom. They heard the word class and were like, what? I was like,
That's right. Reminded them of school and immediately was like, And Allie was quick to assure them, this is not school. You do not have to worry about that. So she arranged the kids sitting in 2 rows so that she could begin this portion of the session. And then as that was happening, if I understand correctly, Allie, you realized, I don't really like the fact that the kids in row 2 are basically looking at the backs of the heads of the kids in row 1. So right away in Allie's mind, she's thinking, next time I'm making a change and I'm going to have the kids sit in 2 rows facing each other and I will just move back and forth between them. So this sounds like an example to me of your using your experience in the moment to identify where tweaking your approach may improve the kids' experience of the program and enhance its effectiveness.
Yeah, I like the kids interacting with one another more so, plus that it sort of, they were right. It was a little bit like a class, and I don't necessarily want that.
Right.
But I want them to be able to see each other's faces, and if we're having a discussion across the room, to kind of allow them to interact in a more face-to-face way.
Exactly.
And I did realize, and this kind of goes back to those larger numbers issue that we had.
Right.
So I sort of brainstormed how I'm going to do that next time so that we can create an environment where everybody can hear me and see me, but also each other. So that will help, I think, work towards the community aspect of it, and also that everybody's points are valid for when it's time to share. And kids who are in the back, so to speak, no one's in the back at that point. So
right, there is no back.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So before this master class actually began, Allie recapped the tools of the trade, which you may remember we described in our last videocast, which is the body, the voice, and the face, which will all be very important in this emotion master class, as we're about to see. So Allie now officially begins, and the kids are hopefully reassured that this is not school. Now, Allie's original intention was to do what she calls a 30-second emotion inventory, which, Allie, you usually do a little bit later on in the year, but you thought you would try it now. However, Allie read the room and determined there were a good number of kids she felt just were not going to be ready for this.
Not ready.
And so you opted to wait to do this a little bit later. So that leads me to think of actually a two-part question. One is, why did you initially decide that you wanted to try it at this point? And two, how did you make the evaluation that these kids were not ready? And this goes back a little bit to what we were talking about moments ago when you were reading these individual kids.
So why did I want to do it initially?
Yes.
The whole focus of the lesson or the activity was to connect with emotion, and what does that feel like? What are the attributes of various emotions, things like that. And later on I will be introducing some very developmentally appropriate meditative practice with them to kind of get centered and become a little more self-aware and ready to work, knowing when am I, ready to work versus not, etc. I thought this could be a good opportunity to introduce that because we were focusing on emotion. So I would just take 30 seconds on the clock, eyes closed, if comfortable with that, and sort of feel where we are emotionally, where the energy level is, where our body is, are we tense in places, things like that. And that's a great kickoff for this activity to kind of, and then we all kind of use that. How are you feeling? How are you feeling? How are you feeling? To kind of explore the various range of emotions that we all feel. But I just looked around and I have a good amount of kids that are still on that younger, a little more immature side of it. And I didn't know if the activity would lose them more than engage them. And I think with the risk versus reward attribute there, I was like, let's just get to it. So we move right into the brainstorm rather than taking that moment. In retrospect, I think, I don't know, I might try it in the next one and one after, sooner than later, I think, because I don't like to sort of peel off layers of what I consider to be valuable. But at that moment, I kind of made that judgment call to move on, to get more to the activity, to the games, attribute, that associate with the activity. So
could, now I'm thinking of something else, could this be an example of where you introduce an idea, a concept, an exercise, some or many of the kids may have a little bit of difficulty with it, but then you reintroduce again and you try again and you try again over time. Might that be an example of something that is developed through a true process as opposed to a one-shot deal?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This definitely was me kind of making that assessment on that day. It wasn't the best day for this activity, but we definitely will be introducing that because when we get, especially towards the end of the season, when we're really getting ready for production, we have a legitimate, 5-minute meditation just to separate ourselves from where we came from into where we're headed in the afternoon as we get into especially those more concrete full tech rehearsals, things like that. I teach them ways to truly manage their energy, identify what's happening with it, and then to channel it into a way that's going to be beneficial for the entire group and what we're doing that day. Right. So this is sort of the introduction of that. This is earlier than I normally introduce that, was this our past meeting. But I am going to pepper it in different activities because they're a very high energy group. So I think it's going to be valuable. That's one of the reasons too I wanted to kind of start it, but I didn't feel it. I wasn't feeling right about it. But we're going to be peppering that in, introducing that and a little bit here and there. Right.
And those instincts essentially that you have been finely honed over a long period of time as not only, I imagine, as a theater educator, but as an academician, an actual educator as well. Yeah. So it sounds like you can pick this information up pretty easily. And it, to me, shows that you really do respond organically to your assessment of where the students are in the moment, make the appropriate adjustments, or what you feel are the appropriate adjustments, even if it deviates from the planned curriculum.
And you can't make everybody happy. I'm sure that if I had said after the fact to some of the kids what I would have done, I'm sure some of them were like, oh, that would have been great. We should have done that, blah, blah, blah. You know, but that's, you can't please everybody. You please the group. Do what you can.
No, you do. You make the best decision you can make in the moment. And it sounds like you certainly did. And you began this class, if you will, with what Allie calls the emotion wheel, which lists a whole variety of different emotional nuances. And Allie tosses out the first big question of this class, which is, and by the way, I think we could ask this question of ourselves as adults as well, which is, how do we really know how someone else is feeling? And the kids' responses tended to be around the tools of the trade, essentially body language, vocal intonation, and facial expression. I think it would be great at this point, Allie, if you can explain to all of us the benefits of the investigation of emotions in others and how we read those emotions and how we can work with them.
I think when we investigate emotion in general with kids in this context, we're having that self-reflection is key, especially in theatric arts, because so much of the storytelling we're doing is an exact reflection of what's happening in life. So becoming very attuned to your own emotional state is key. And then jumping from there, recognizing that in others, it builds empathy awareness. And we can also kind of relate that into the specific characters too. We start recognizing what's happening in ourselves, what's happening in others. How do we create that? How do we build on that? What are going to be the reactions of someone feeling a certain way? How does emotion change and shift? What are the causes of those changes and shifts? How do we play that out? But it really all kind of stems from the human experience, which I'm sort of asking the kids to open up to a little bit in the context of this discussion, which we then relay into a game that we eventually get to play through that. So
that's great. So, and here's an example, as I kind of hinted at just a moment ago, of work that you're doing ostensibly in service of theatrical training, but in fact, as you pointed out, because this is an essential part of the human experience, and developmentally speaking, the kids are at a critical age where they're really beginning to access and try and make sense of their emotional experience. I think you bring value on so many levels by your approach. And the second big question Allie puts out there after, how do you know how the other person is feeling, is how do we as actors express how our characters feel? And the answer really revolves around two major points: what Allie calls what you show and what you know. What you show being, again, thinking about tools of the trade, your facial expression, tone of voice, body language. What you know, though, is what winds up, I think, being the experience of any actor who has to essentially develop a story that plays out beneath the surface, which is based on a knowledge of the internal experiences of his or her character, and really understanding what that character is going through and taking that knowledge using it to then shape the external characteristics of that character. Did I get that right, Allie? But can you elaborate as a resident expert here?
Yeah. So we talk about what you know plus what you show as a combination of creating character in a theatrical context, right? So Sanford Meisner, Meisner Technique, Neighborhood Playhouse, his big philosophy, among many others, is living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. Right. And I use that. I mean, it's a very adult concept of an acting technique, but the kids relate to it, and I bring it down to their level, like appropriate level.
Okay.
So we're talking about basically living as, or reacting and feeling as if you would based on the imaginary circumstances or the context in which your character is existing. So we ask them, like you mentioned, that current or that undercurrent, the what you know part is your backstory, it's your history, it's understanding the context of the scene, and all of that knowledge is sort of flowing underneath the words, which then lift the words off the page, right? And one of the kids, actually the same kid that did the Clap Connect, was I had asked, like, how do people create characters? How do we express that? And he said, you have to do it really big, really extreme. And I was like, well, possibly. I said, can you elaborate? Can you tell me more? What he had meant was, like, we have to make your actions really big so the back row can see you. And I'm like, okay, we'll come back to that. And I said, let's talk a little bit more on that undercurrent level, that behind the scenes, what's happening in the mind level first. And I explained, like, what I just did, the backstory and all of this. But then I was able to bring it back to what he contributed by saying, so yes, sometimes those waves are really, they're little ripples, right? But other times they are really extreme and they are really big. And that difference, the textures that you see within one character, that's really what creates that realism. So I was able to bring back his contribution, which was nice.
That's really great.
He had a stressful day.
Really? That's good. Wow.
It was good. No, it was good stress. But so that was kind of fun being able to bring it back to him. But yeah, so that's how I teach them the connection between what you know and what you show together brings character forth, and emotion is the driving force behind that. So.
And then continuing with the whole idea of fleshing out understanding of emotion, Allie then goes into a game that's called Emotion Change-Up. So the kids are paired in teams of two. And kid number one says to kid number two, what are you doing? Kid number two responds, what does it look like? But here's the kicker. Another student will call out an emotion, let's say anger. And that means that duo needs to deliver their lines in an angry fashion. And then maybe 3-4 other kids will have an opportunity to call out another emotion, frustration, happiness, surprise. And those two lines, what are you doing? What does it look like? Are delivered in a variety of different ways. And Allie, you said this goes pretty quickly, which is helpful not only to enable all of the kids to participate, but it, as you, I think, said to me last week, it doesn't give the kids too much time to overthink it. They can just, boom, in the moment, what's coming to you, put it out there. Now, in our last videocast, we spoke at length about our speculations about the implications of having such a large number of students in the drama club this year. How did the large size come into play with this particular exercise?
It was a little bit of a challenge. I definitely had to maintain the integrity of the game, so that we're not just all wandering off and talking and chatting in groups, which didn't happen, thankfully. But you want to keep the attention of all the kids too. I tried to have the kids a lot of the times I'll call out the emotion at first. Right off the bat, I had the kids calling out emotion. I would maybe tap them on the shoulder or give them an eye signal or something like that. And eventually I was able to completely step back and allow them to kind of feel out who was going to call out next, which is good because everybody's more focused and in tune to the game. Okay. And it did move pretty quickly. I was able to get everybody up there, which is,
wow.
Yeah, it worked. So, but it was a challenge. On the spot, I was like, okay, I don't want to lose these kids right now. Because again, right. I wasn't sure if Masterclass was still in the back of their mind, if they were just waiting for turns and all of that. You get worried. You don't want to lose any of them. And I worry a lot about that. I do. I don't want to, I want them to have fun every minute that they're there. I do. You want that. So, but it was successful. For the most part, it was good. They did well. The same kid. Wow. Yeah. I'm learning he has a lot of energy. He did. He actually, I think his, he's becoming a little more comfortable or whatever in the context of the game we were playing. He was with another kid who I now know they're really good friends, which is great. But they did start to get real chatty and start to get physically squirmy sitting around. So I was like, okay. So we might even, I don't know. I'm going to have to think about that and what I can do to make these games continue to flow, But we'll see how we do with that.
Exactly. Stay tuned. It's a process.
Absolutely. Yeah. Stay tuned.
Well, at the end of the meeting, Allie tossed out to the kids the idea that anyone who would like to remain a little while longer could, while reassuring those who had to leave on time that it was perfectly fine, because, sometimes Allie and the kids will be in the middle of something and would like to be able to complete it or come close to completion. Yeah. And so it turned out that a fairly large number of kids did stay. And Allie asked them to divide into groups of at least 5 or more kids. And the instruction was to develop a scene in which there was some kind of emotional change that took place, whether it was within one character or multiple characters, or perhaps an entire scene shifted in its feeling. There was an emotional shift overall. And Allie gave them about 15 minutes or so to develop this scene, with the promise that in the next meeting, they would be able to then perform those scenes for their peers. And apparently that was also quite successful from your standpoint.
Yeah, we're going to see how it shapes up when they perform. But right. The difference here is that with the initial game, that was all show. That was just, you're just reacting. You have an idea in your mind of what does anger look like, what does embarrassment look like, what does happiness look like. But now the kids who stayed, they're adding the no to that. So they're creating a context for themselves with criteria that they need to meet. So in order to make sure everybody's on board when we do have these performances, those kids that had to leave, they're going to have a job as well. They're going to be analyzing for these things. They're going to say what parts were show. What do you think that character was feeling? What in the context of the scene would create this shift or this change? So we're always going to be looking, even if we weren't one of the people who were able to construct or act in the scene, we're still involved in analyzing it and pulling meaning from it for to build on their own understandings. So we'll see how it goes.
So it sounds like that's one of the ways to ensure engagement of as many people as possible at the same time. Which is, to me, a heck of a difficult thing to pull off. But in fact, Allie, I think it's going to be interesting for our colleagues to watch your process over time as you figure out ways to adjust your approach and your curriculum to accommodate such a large number of kids and do it the way you've explained to us you really want to, where to the greatest extent possible, everyone is involved, even if it's not in exactly the same way. And it may be more of that, I don't know if we talked about it in the Videocast or privately, but the jigsaw kind of idea where different kids are working on different aspects of a problem and all come together to create the whole, so to speak. And I'm sure that's just one possibility among many. And we so look forward to hearing how you figured this out.
Yes. And there's something too to be said about having to wait for something also. Just in these beginning weeks, I want them to have fun all the time. And then we learn, okay, so not every moment is going to be, you have to practice some of that patience as well. Because when we get later on into our rehearsal process, like way later on in the rehearsal process, there is some waiting, and there is kids going to have to mind themselves and direct themselves and go over there and wait until I'm ready to come over if they need to wait for me. So, but in these early stages, I really want to kind of like hook them and get them engaged and get them committed in a sense, even if it's just for their own interest to kind of stick with something and keep coming back. So,
I tell you, that sounds like a lot of pressure on you.
Well, it's...
to have the expectation that you, as this grand maestro, somehow have the ability to make sure there's no lags for anyone at this point.
I mean, that's what you hope for. I don't know that it's pressure. I mean, I guess it's pressure. Yeah, I worry. I worry that they had fun, but you just want to create the best thing that you can create. You want to wrap for the day knowing that you did all that you could. And also completely understanding that you're going to have some kid in the corner who's like on his cell phone and you're like, and you realize he's texting his mom or whatever, and that's fine. And then he comes on back and you're like, what were you doing over there? And he's like, no, I just texted my mom. But as we go, I just want to make sure that they see the space as a place that they're having fun, that they're engaged in, that they're free to create, so that as the year goes on, they're not just texting their mom because they need to figure out what time they're getting picked up. They're not even worrying about that. They're just like, okay, here,
they're so
I'm here.
Engaged.
Yeah. Because that's going to pay off later. You need to have them invest. So you have to create something that they want to invest in. And these early weeks are really kind of key to that. So,
exactly. It sounds like a lot of pressure to me.
It's fun pressure, though. It's like I'm creating something, that I really enjoy, and I just want to share it with them. That's kind of what it feels like at this stage. I don't feel entirely pressured to make it as best as it could be just because I want it to. Like, I really enjoy creating something that I think they'll enjoy.
Then I imagine that is really key, because your enthusiasm is infectious, I would think. And or we at least we hope so. But I would imagine the kids, even if they don't have the conscious awareness, can read that about you and are drawn in because this clearly matters so much to you. It is such a central part of your life, personally and professionally. You believe in what you're doing, and you really bring them into the process in a quite a dramatic way from the very beginning. And I guess one can do that in a very sort of antiseptic, clinical way, or it can come out of what you have described, which is true passion for what you're doing. And I think these kids are very fortunate to have you and your passion envelop them in this environment where they're going to undoubtedly grow tremendously. And so we look forward to sharing with you, as always, how this does unfold over time. So we thank you for being with us. Thank you, Allie. Thank you to our colleagues. And we look forward to telling you all about the next middle school meeting in our next video cast.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.